Thank you for joining me during this 40-minute seminar to better understand how you can help your dyslexic or struggling reader. There's two goals I hope to accomplish today. One is for you to gain some specific hands-on best practices or ideas that will help your child retain more knowledge. The other goal is for you to gain a better understanding of the foundational concepts that you're going to need to know to be able to help your child become a better reader. Just so you know a little bit about me, my name is Jane Engel. I spent 30 years in the elementary classroom, and the focus of my master's was best practices for at-risk students. I went on to teach for 6 years at the postgraduate level at St. Mary's University in Minnesota, helping teachers that were getting their master's. Then I trained at the Dyslexia Institute of Minnesota. When I left the classroom, I started tutoring, and I was absolutely overwhelmed by the number of students that struggled with reading. I had so many students that I could not possibly meet the demand. My own children were trying to convince me that I needed to start saying no, which for me was very hard to do. I always felt that if God brought them to me, I should help them. As a result, I was incredibly exhausted. I thought I was going to be focusing on the kids in the learning to read phase, but I was incredibly surprised at how many kids should have been in the reading to learn phase, but they were still struggling to read. So I began creating work for parents to do with their child, since I couldn't see everyone face to face as much as I should have. That's when I realized parents are very eager to work with their kids, they just don't know how to go about it. So I needed to help parents help their children. You may have heard of Orton and Gillingham because they created an approach that is sort of the gold standard even today. About a century ago, they began working with adult brain damage patients, and they were able to teach them to read again. When they were so successful at that, they thought, why are we not doing this with dyslexic kids or struggling readers? So what they did back then is still in use today, and it has inspired numerous curriculums. What they developed, though, was an approach, and it was not a curriculum. They designed it to be direct one-on-one instruction. They believed that dyslexic students should not be shoehorned into a curriculum. Instead, lessons should be individualized so that they could meet each child's specific needs. The one drawback is that a century ago, they didn't have access to some of the research that we do today. So what do I mean by cater to your child's needs? Let's take a look at this worksheet. Let's say you want to introduce the digraph CH when it sometimes sounds like shh. So you're looking at this worksheet and you realize it is just too difficult for your child, and your child would get frustrated. You know your child has never heard of the word quiche and never played geocaching outside. In fact, has never even heard of the word cache. So you begin to individualize the worksheet to fit your child's ability level. This is just one of the many differences between an approach and a curriculum. If your child is older and at the reading to learn stage, don't do this. By then, your child will have the foundational skills to take on those words and figure out what they are. It explains why numerous parents have told me that one of their dyslexic kids did really well with an Orton-Gillingham-based curriculum, but another child did not. They're actually quite fortunate that one of them did do well. Orton and Gillingham never intended it to be a curriculum. It's like trying to force a child into learning the way someone else thought would be a good idea. We need to base the learning on the child instead. When you're preparing your lessons, each activity needs to include 3 pathways to the brain. The visual pathway is the most common, and most people are visual learners. The auditory pathway, of course, would include the ears, and then the kinesthetic pathway is movement and the sense of feeling. One of the most important things to remember with the visual pathway is to use color. 100 years ago, they didn't have the research to understand what an important role color played. Psychologists have found that not only does it enhance visual memory, but even in Alzheimer's patients, it improves memory. Colors will help your child's brain organize information. For example, on this slide, the vowel team EA actually has two sounds. It can sound like a short E or a long E. So when your child is reading, don't be surprised if he or she will say something like, "Is that the pink sound?" And that's perfect. That's exactly what you want. The brain is organizing sounds by color. Our goal is to help your child retrain his or her brain to form or reorganize synaptic connections. And if color helps us to achieve this, then let's make sure we use it. Another aspect of the visual pathway is to use a simple font. Even as an adult, I prefer a simple font and I'm not a struggling reader. Use large print. A lot of small print can be overwhelming, and even the older student will do better with larger print. If you have no choice but to use small print, try having your child use a finger under the word that's being read, or use a piece of paper underneath to block out upcoming words to help stay focused on the correct line. Another option to provide a visual pathway is to use a mirror. Let your child see how the mouth changes with each sound he's creating. Use the phrase, "watch my mouth," a lot. This is critical. It provides all three pathways to the brain and gives your child a chance to imitate you doing it correctly. Also, for the auditory pathway, I can't stress the importance of singing enough. When I was young, there was a song called "This Diamond Ring," and I just loved this song. And for some odd reason, my brain hung on to that. And it was just a few months ago that it popped back into my head, and I decided to see if I could write down the lyrics. Well, I could write down the entire song, the lyrics to the entire song. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to know how long my brain had hung on to that song, so I looked it up to see when it was written. I couldn't believe it. Don't underestimate the power of a song. Your brain is much more likely to hang on to it. So be creative and be brave even if you think you don't have a very good voice. If your child likes a certain tune, you got to run with it. It will help stick in his brain much longer. Besides music, one last idea for the auditory pathway is to always have your child read out loud, whether it's a passage or sounding out a single word or working on worksheets or using flashcards. Whatever it is you're doing, have your child say everything out loud. Let's switch to the kinesthetic pathway for a moment. Flashcards are a great way to take advantage of the kinesthetic pathway. The normal way we use them is you would usually hold them, you would flip through them, and your child would give you the answer. So let's give this the 3 pathways to the brain test. Is your child using a visual pathway to the brain? Well, clearly, because he's got to look at it. How about auditory pathway to the brain? Yep, because he will have to say something out loud, just like we talked about a minute ago. How about the kinesthetic pathway? Not at all. So when you're using flashcards, don't hold them yourself. Let your child be the one to hold them and arrange them, because there's so many ways to use flashcards that truly are kinesthetic, and they will provide that movement that your child needs instead of you getting it. If your child is a young reader and still learning his sounds, you could start by taking a small number of flashcards. I would suggest not starting from the beginning of the alphabet. That's just a little too easy. But have your child arrange them and put them in order as he says the alphabet chant for each letter. And I will get to the alphabet chant a little bit later. The flip over game works well for both simple sounds and more complicated ones for the older reader. Put down flashcards face down so that your child can't see what they are, and if he did happen to, mix them up a little bit. Then have your child turn one card over. If he can pronounce it correctly, as in this case, n, then leave it face up. If he turns it over and pronounces it wrong, maybe he says mb. Have him turn it face down until he gets it right twice. And then keep at it until they are all turned up. Another option to use the flashcards is to have your child create a chart. Now, if you're working on long vowel sounds, there are so many cards, so many different ways to create a long vowel sound. Most of them are vowel teams, and it can get pretty confusing. So in this case, I've used the short vowel cards as the headings. And one by one, your child can put the corresponding card underneath the correct heading. And as she does, be sure she says the sound. Remember to start out with just a few that your child already knows. In this case, maybe your child only knows how to make the long vowel sounds by using the vowels themselves, of course, and then maybe the silent E syllables. As she learns more, add them to the pile of cards you expect her to know. Not only will you be amazed at her progress, she will have such a sense of accomplishment as her chart grows bigger and bigger with practice. Here we have clustering, and this is a great activity to use with the cards that represent sounds that aren't long and aren't short. They're a little confusing. And you're going to just spread them out all over and let your child cluster them into groups that sound alike. For example, you can look at all the ways that make the ah sound, which there happens to be 6, or the ways to make the oi sound, or how to make the ow sound. Finally, with the flashcards, you can use them for blending. You could put them on a simple consonant-vowel consonant mat, or you could use them just on their own and create slightly more difficult words. You could use specific cards to create words themselves, or you could let your child pick from a variety of cards and just make some nonsense words with them. Previously, I had mentioned the alphabet chant, and this is for the very young child that's still learning their letters and the corresponding sounds. What you want to do is find a word that they can relate with to represent whatever sound it is that you're trying to learn. For example, let's say you're working on a short A, and maybe your child has a brother named Adam. If that's the case, you would say A, Adam, A. And then just move through the whole alphabet, B, ball, B, C, cat, K. And initially, just stick with one sound per letter, even if that letter has more than one sound. For example, C can make a K sound or an S sound. Just stick with the K sound. The alphabet chant needs to become rote memorization, just sort of like when you had to memorize your multiplication tables. It just needs to come automatically. And in order to do that, you need to temporarily eliminate the visual component, which seems counterintuitive. But in order for it to become fast, you need to be able to recite it without looking. It can be a bit of a challenge trying to incorporate the kinesthetic pathway into all these activities. So for the alphabet chant, my suggestion is to have your child take a step for each right answer. So if they're moving heel to toe across the room, they'll be able to literally see the progress they've made. If they miss one or they can't remember the sound, don't take a step for that one. And then after they've been at it a few days in a row, they'll realize how much farther they've gone. The trick with the kinesthetic pathway is to figure out what it is your little one likes to do and then somehow try to incorporate that in their learning. There's an awful lot of little ones that struggle with short vowel sounds. I had one little guy who really struggled with them, and he loved to run and jump as high as he possibly could. He was always trying to hit this or that. So I made some vowel cards, and I put them on a wall, or if you don't have room on a wall, you could use a door. And I would say the sound, like maybe I'd say a short A, I'd say eh. And he would have to run and jump to touch the correct one. And it wasn't long before he had every single one of them down pat. When your child can recognize a letter and knows the corresponding sound, he's ready to begin writing that letter. So, how do you help your child feel letters? There's so many ways, I can't begin to cover them all, but there's some ideas here that might help. You could try cutting letters out of sandpaper. You could put salt or sand in a pan. I would not use sugar. Then have your child draw the letters in the pan. You could paint the letters with the puffy paint so that they can feel the letters. You could put shaving cream in a pan and once again have them draw in the pan. Or hair gel in a plastic bag. I'd add some food coloring to make it a little more fun. You can draw on the bag. And you could put sprinkles that you would normally put on top of a cupcake in a plastic bag, and once again, they could draw on it then. If your child is writing those letters fairly well and you think, okay, we're ready to start encoding or spelling, but your child sometimes struggles to blend those sounds together, and when they say the sounds, they come up pretty choppy. Just know that time is on your side. Practice and time will help get those sounds blended. But there's a few things you can do in the meantime. Try helping your child put those sounds together by doing some arm spelling. For each sound in the word, you're going to touch a different spot on your arm. Start up at your shoulder and say the first sound in the word. Be sure to say the sound and not the letter. Let's spell the word stop. So touch the shoulder and say the S sound. Then move down the arm a little bit and say the T sound. Put the S and T sounds together. St. Move down the arm a little more and say the Ah sound. Always go back after each new sound and add it to the ones you've already done. St, ah. Go down the wrist and add the P sound. Go through all the sounds as you slide your hand down the arm. Do this repeatedly and get faster and faster each time. If you use this routine each time you sound out a word, eventually the choppiness will begin to disappear. Your child will get there. If your child has pretty good fine motor control, you can do the same thing with your fingers while you touch finger by finger to your thumb. So for example, S, you would touch your pointer finger to your thumb and say S, and so on down the line. Then, when you're ready to say the whole thing, slide your thumb right down your fingertips as you say each sound a little bit faster. Your child may struggle with fine motor dexterity and find handwriting a challenge. You'll probably be able to tell if he's ready to put those sounds together to do some spelling, which is also known as encoding. There's no point in holding him back from spelling just because his fine motor is not there yet. So try using flashcards instead. Have your child pick out the correct letters from a smaller group of flashcards and put them in the right order. Don't lay the flashcards for the entire alphabet out. That would simply be too overwhelming. Or if you have letter magnets on your refrigerator, those would work beautifully too. Fine motor control for handwriting often lags behind a child's ability to put those correct sounds and corresponding letters in the right order. So if he's ready, just use manipulatives. You know your child better than anyone, and you know what he does and doesn't like to do. So now the idea is to figure out what he loves and then somehow incorporate that into learning. If your child likes to color or run, or jump, or whatever activity it is, figure out a way to incorporate that into learning and be creative. Give your child the opportunity to love learning. The other goal I want to cover is the foundational concepts. I want to make sure that you understand exactly what it is that you're going to be teaching your child. So the best place to start is the big picture. If you can explain to your child the whole picture, when he or she learns individual concepts, she'll have that foundation of where to plug that concept in. This will help organize information in a child's brain better and help create those synapses that we're looking for. Despite the fact that our language has hundreds of thousands of words, we actually only have 6 different kinds of syllables in the entire English language. And there's 6 vowel patterns that will help to divide words into syllables. It looks very simple. Am I oversimplifying? Absolutely. This is the table of contents from the Orton and Gillingham and Beyond workbook. I had to double some of the columns of the material or it would have been 5 pages long, and that doesn't even include the advanced phonics. There is an incredible amount of information to cover, and if we tried to, we'd be here for weeks. And this is what it's all based on. The foundation actually is quite simple, and I just want you to understand the overview. You'll notice that at the top there's the acronym CLOVER. This actually isn't the order that you're going to teach these concepts to your child. It's just an easy way for your child to remember the different kinds of syllables. So you might say, okay, would you get out your CLOVER chart, please? They'll know exactly what you're talking about. Every one of these vowel patterns actually starts with a vowel, except the second one, the L, consonant LE. That's the only one that does not start with a vowel. If you look at the first one, C stands for closed. That pattern is vowel consonant. And if you look at some of the word examples underneath, let's take scrap. There's actually 3 other letters in front of the vowel, an S, a C, and an R, and they're actually irrelevant. We want to start with the A. So the pattern would be A, P, vowel, consonant. When you have a pattern like that, the vowel is going to be short. Skip over the consonant LE, and the next pattern you're going to teach is the open syllable. That's a syllable that ends with a vowel. Sort of think of it as it just keeps right on going. Therefore, the vowel is going to sound long, as in no, me, she, whatever. If you were to put a consonant after that vowel, it would change into a closed syllable, and it sort of cuts off that vowel and it shortens it and makes it short. Skip over the vowel team syllable because that's really a challenging one. There's all kinds of options on that one. And go to silent E. This one's pretty straightforward. If you take a closed syllable, which is a vowel and a consonant, and you add a silent E to the end of it, you have gone from a short vowel sound to a long vowel sound. For example, not becomes note, scrap becomes scrape, slim becomes slime, and so on. After you've taught those 3 kinds of syllable patterns, your child is probably beginning to get the hang of it and understanding what these are. So go ahead and try a vowel team next. This is a tricky one because vowel teams are not consistent. You can have vowel teams that are long. You can have vowel teams that are short. You can have vowel teams that are neither, and they're diphthongs, as in oi or ow. That's when you start off as one vowel sound and you kind of slide into another. And in addition, you can't just throw any 2 vowels together and call them a team. For example, OU is a team, as in noun. However, UO is not a vowel team, and if you see it in a word, you would have to separate it and make sure that the O and the U are in different syllables. The R-controlled is also kind of a tricky syllable pattern. It's always a vowel first, followed by an R, and the problem is they don't really come across as true long vowels or true short vowels. If you have the word her, we sort of call it short, but it can become here, and those are both R-controlled words. The last type of syllable you're going to want to teach is the consonant LE. This type of syllable can only come in words with more than 1 syllable. A consonant LE syllable will always come at the end, and since it doesn't start with a vowel, and it's the only one that doesn't, the sound that it makes is more of a schwa, kind of kull or dull or pull. The other problem is that you can't stick any consonant in front of an LE and call it a consonant LE pattern. For example, if you tried to spell a word with a VLE at the end, you're not going to find very many. Think of the word travel. That's not spelled with a VLE, it's spelled with a VEL, as well as gavel or gravel. So you now have a basic understanding of the 6 types of syllables in the English language. Dividing words into syllables is just as easy. There's only 6 types of patterns. Unfortunately, there's no acronym we can use here, but they are fairly simple. The most common is vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel. For example, let's take a look at napkin. The first vowel is an A, then a P, and a K, then an I. So you're going to divide it between the 2 consonants. That will leave your first syllable as a closed syllable, which means the vowel is going to be short. The next pattern is the only one that can be divided 2 ways. The pattern is vowel, consonant, vowel. If you divide it after the vowel, which is the most common, you're going to end up with an open syllable for the first syllable, and therefore the vowel will be long, as in open. If you divide it after the consonant, that makes the first syllable closed, and therefore it's going to be short. These words would then be pronounced as robin instead of robin, or lemon instead of lemon. The only carryover from the Clover chart is the consonant LE syllable, and it is always divided before the consonant. Take a look at cable. It would be easy to look at that and think, okay, the first vowel is A, then a B, L, E, so that's vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel. Let's divide it between the B and the L. We can't do that. Because it's consonant LE, it has to be divided before the consonant so that you don't end up pronouncing it cable instead of cable. As I mentioned in the Clover chart, you can't take any 2 vowels, put them together, and call them a vowel team. Some are and some aren't. If you look at the word lion, I-O is not a vowel team. O-I is. O-I says oi. If it's not a vowel team, you have to divide it. So we put the division between the I and the O. This leaves the first syllable open, so it will always be long. Now, just because it can be a vowel team doesn't mean it is going to be a vowel team. If you look at create, EA is a vowel team, but you've got a silent E at the end, which makes the A long, so you have to divide the 2 vowels into separate syllables. And finally, the last division pattern is compound words. That one is pretty straightforward, and you simply divide it between the 2 words. You now have the basic understandings of Orton and Gillingham's foundational concepts of how to divide words into syllables. The tool you're going to need to present all these concepts is the lesson plan. I'm actually not going to sit and go through it component by component here because I already have it on my website. If you would like to go to angeleducators.com, there's all kinds of free tutorials, and there's a tutorial for every single category. It explains what to do with each one and what order to do it in and how to keep track of your child's progress. Now, if you're thinking, there is no way my child is going to sit through all this, I couldn't agree more. Orton and Gillingham would love it to be that way, but the reality is it's just a lot. So, my suggestion is keep a chart. You'll notice that this chart is loaded with color. That is intentional. And it also has each category completely correlated to the lesson plan. As your child completes each section, have them check it off. It will definitely provide a sense of accomplishment, and they know what's coming next. And if you're looking at it and thinking it still is too much, fine. Stop whenever you need to and come back to it when you have a chance. Because it's so much more organized in your child's brain, it will seem less overwhelming. In fact, your child may even tell you, okay, we need to start on our red words now. I have a quick personal plug I want to share about having students write properly formed paragraphs and, when they're old enough, properly formed papers. Parents work so hard getting their struggling readers to read well, it's so easy to forget to make sure that they can also write well. That's just my personal little plug. Speaking of writing, one quick note about dysgraphia. Dyslexia and dysgraphia occur together about 30% of the time, meaning if you have a struggling reader, there's about a 1 in 3 chance you're going to have a struggling writer. If ADHD or autism is thrown in the mix, those numbers double. When it comes to handwriting paper for the student with dysgraphia, there's all kinds of choices out there. My favorite is the raised line, which unfortunately is usually the most expensive. However, it's fairly easy to make your own template and create your own and save a bunch of money in the process. The reason I like it is because it provides that kinesthetic component. Your child can actually feel where he needs to stop the vast majority of letters. Start by going to the Orton Gillingham and Beyond bundle. Scroll down to the last page of the table of contents and click on Teaching Aids. That will take you straight down to the back of the book where most of the teaching aids are. Unfortunately, there is no link that goes directly to each different kind of handwriting paper. You may have to go to RedWords and click on that, or go to Charts to Print, click on that, and then scroll from there to your favorite kind of paper. For our purposes, I chose the kind of handwriting paper that most beginning writers would use. Then print off a sheet in color. It's easy to make a template to make your own raised handwriting paper, and you can put as many lines on it as you want. As you can see here, I only have 1 line on mine, and each one of those has 2 manila strips in it for the indentations. Then you're going to need cardboard for the backing, your manila folder, and some glue stick. Glue down your folded strips of manila at the right intervals and use as many of those as you want to make lines for the indentations. Then get yourself an old pen that doesn't write anymore. Put your paper face down and put your pen at an angle so that it doesn't tear your handwriting paper as you're drawing your lines. Then, without pressing too hard, make your indentations on the lines. You should be able to feel the bumps when you're all done with it, and that's exactly what your beginning writer needs to be able to feel. So the looming question is, how often do I have to do these lessons with my child? In a perfect world, 5 days a week, 1 hour every day, but I don't know anyone that lives in a perfect world. You may be thinking, this is just too much. I don't have the time. I can't do this. I'd like to encourage you not to give up on your child or on yourself. Countless others have been through the same thing, and it is possible with phenomenal results. God is fully aware of what you're going through, and He doesn't make mistakes. You may be thinking, but my kids are such a challenge. I'm just not sure that I'm up for this. Meet my sister's kids. They were some of the most challenging children I have ever known. And remember, I was a classroom teacher for 30 years. By the way, I do have permission to share this story. All 3 of them had major sensory issues in addition to energy levels through the roof. I'd be here all day if I were to describe their behavior. My poor sister tried everything, or at least it seemed like it. Things got so bad that at one point she was literally lying face down on the floor in tears, crying out to God because she just couldn't do it anymore. She and her husband Jim chose to lean in on God. They were determined to deal with their kids as scripturally as they could. Now today, because of all the trials they went through, they've created a nonprofit to help other Christian parents use a biblical framework for parenting. Is this what God is going to expect you to accomplish after all your trials? Probably not. But you never know what He has in store for your kids. And getting through life without being able to read well is a challenge none of us wants our kids to go through. I like my sister's perspective on it. God has so much grace for us when we struggle. Since dyslexic children's brains are literally wired differently, they have an uncanny ability to think outside the box, which means they are fabulous problem solvers. So much so that when NASA was trying to put a man on the moon, they purposely sought out dyslexic engineers and scientists. In fact, half of them were dyslexic, and the same is still true today. Once you help your child through what now may seem like insurmountable challenges, he or she will have an amazing skill set that can take them to incredible places. If this is something you don't want to take on alone and you would like some help with your dyslexic or struggling reader, go to our angeleducators.com website and sign up for our free newsletter. Each newsletter will arrive in your email box with tips and articles that will take you back to our website. In addition, you'll receive a free worksheet that you can download that also happens to have a video that you can use as you go through it with your child. All you have to do is be ready to press the pause button so that your child has a chance to give the answer before the video does. And of course, we have all kinds of free tutorials that you can refer back to as often as you need. If you would like to order the Orton Gillingham and Beyond bundle, just go to our website at angeleducators.com. If you'd like to send us an email, go to info@angeleducators.com. Thank you so much for joining me today.